My name is Janelle Esparza, head of education and artist, and lovely employee of the McNay. Thank you guys for joining us here tonight. Yeah, we're just gonna get settled. I love the cozy vibe here tonight. I love that everybody was chatting and talking and getting to know each other. That is such a nice feeling. And I feel like it was brought on by our lovely guests. Thank you so much. I'm going to start off with a brief land acknowledgement, and then I'll get into some introductions for our speakers before we get to give them a warm welcome of our own. We acknowledge the San Antonio River as Yanaguana, or spirit waters in Pajalate, as the source of life for the city. We acknowledge this place as San Antonio as the traditional homeland of many Native American peoples who are called Guahuitecan in Spanish records, but consist of 200 tribes, bands, and clans known as the Payaya, Auteca, Paguame, Jarame, Pompopa, Borrado, and other Aboriginal peoples who continue to carry their traditions and are very much alive and well today. Thanks so much for being here tonight and gathering together to hold space for our guest artists. They have so much to share with us tonight. O Powa O Meng, or I Came Here, I Got Here, I'm Still Going, celebrates the groundbreaking vision of Jody Folwell, the renowned contemporary potter from Capo Owinge, also known as Santa Clara, Pueblo, New Mexico, widely recognized as one of the most influential clay artists of her generation. Folwell transformed the field of Pueblo pottery by expanding its forms, narratives, and expressive possibilities. Her innovative use of written, personal, political, and social commentary on clay established a new visual language that reshaped both Pueblo and Native art. Showcasing iconic works that trace the full arc of her artistic development, the exhibition situates Folwell within the intersecting contexts of Capo Owinge traditions, Native American art, and the broader fields of contemporary and American art. Co-curated by Adriana Gricci-Green, PhD, Jill Alberg-Yohe, PhD, and Bruce Bernstein, the exhibition is accompanied by a fully illustrated catalog enriched with essays and reflections from Folwell's peers, friends, and family. I understand that we have a very limited amount of these catalogs left. You may have seen them up at the front, and there will be a chance to get it signed by the artists and organizers of the exhibition after the talk. Also featured in the exhibition is the work of Susan Folwell, one of today's leading innovators of Pueblo pottery. The daughter of Jody Folwell experiments boldly with clay and techniques while drawing inspiration from traditional designs. Susan's award-winning work has been widely recognized at the Santa Fe Indian Market and the Hurd Indian Market and highlighted in publications such as NDN and Free Spirit. Co-curator Bruce Bernstein, a leading authority in Southwest Native arts, brings more than 4 decades of collaborative museum work for the project. A trained ethnologist and former curator and museum director in Santa Fe and Washington, D.C., he has shaped inclusive models for collections and exhibition practices and curated over 100 exhibitions. Bernstein currently serves as Historic Preservation Officer for the Pueblo de San Ildefonso and holds a PhD in anthropology from the University of New Mexico. Everybody, please give a warm welcome to our special guests.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight to talk with these 2 amazing artists, in which it's my privilege to be sitting here next to and to have as friends for all these decades. I'm very appreciative. The origin of the exhibit is very straightforward. Jody has made pottery her entire life. There were a couple of brief moments when she didn't. And she's never really been recognized for all the innovation and changes she's brought. Now, there's some reason for that, and part of that reason might be because she just was going on to the next piece and the next piece and the next piece, raising 3 kids, raising cattle and chickens, and farming and building houses and doing all sorts of different things. But most of it has to do with the uniqueness of the community that she comes from, Capo Wingay, Santa Clara Pueblo, as it's also known. And in that place is a strong, vibrant community of Native people. And in this community, it has not always been easy to survive the onslaught of Spanish and American governments and militaries that have come and told people what they should do and what they should be, how they should behave, how they shouldn't behave, and so on. And this, believe it or not, still goes on today in so many different ways. And sometimes that sense of who people should be or not be comes from within the community itself. So part of Jody and Susan's story is part of how they have gently, most of the time, moved their community along from place to place, what Jody calls in the exhibition a half step. This community of Santa Clara is about 2,500 people, maybe as many as 3,000 people today. It has what they call in Indian country a constitutional government. They were allowed to govern, the United States government allowed the sovereign nation to govern itself if it would form a government in the fashion of the American government, which, by the way, was fashioned on the basis of the Iroquois government. But if they would do that, and they did that in the 1930s, they re-governed themselves. But in this community of farmers, people were self-sustaining pre-war. And with World War II, a great change came to the area, and that's those Alamos National Labs. And with those labs became not just the circumstance with research into nuclear weaponry, but it's also about the need for people to come and work in the labs. And it's a need for people then, as they started working in the labs, that life shifted to cash economy. And as people shifted to cash economy, they became more and more reliant on the outside world. The story of Jody's pottery then is that people in the community started to make pottery for the outside world. And in this pottery made for the outside world, it became simpler and simpler. It became more and more about what the outside world thought about the community and less about the biographical, contextual ideas of who the community is. It became more past tense than present tense, but it sold well. And into that spot, into this thing called Indian Market, which is a huge phenomena in Santa Fe in August, Jody gently stepped. It was gentle, right?
Right. I agree with you.
Jody gently stepped with this pot, which she calls half step. And this pot is a Santa Clara pot. Nobody else agreed that, except for Jody. And what she did is the pot is divided into thirds. There's a red band at the top, there's a red band at the bottom, but she left the middle blank without a slip. And she did that so she could do something. And if I remember right, she wasn't quite sure what she would do, but she did these applique of these buffalo on it. It's quite astounding that she came about this. And when she brought it to market, there's a photo of her with the pot in 1975 up in the exhibit, in the book too. And I think Davidson, her son-in-law, I asked her that. I said, do you think that pot would have sold if the museum didn't buy it? And without a hesitation, you said no. So really so there's a very vibrant community. It's a very wonderful community. It's still very much alive. Like every other community, it's got its great things and things that can always work differently, but that's not what we're here to talk about tonight. I want to just briefly talk about one more thing before I really get to the meat of what we're going to talk about, and that is, what is Pueblo pottery? I don't know if anyone here collects or knows about Pueblo pottery, but what I want to talk about are the 3 basic things that make Pueblo pottery. First of all, people go out and get their own materials. I mean, they go out and get their own clay and their own temper. They mix those things together. They get their own paints. They get their own slip materials. So out of that, people go and gather, harvest those materials a place where their ancestors have also gone, past, present, and future. So when they go to those places to harvest those materials, their thoughts and their prayers are also in that place. So it's not just going out and digging some dirt, but it's really about a prayerful activity. That's the first thing that makes traditional pottery. Makes no difference if you drive a truck, okay? People say, oh, well, they're using a truck. How's that traditional? Well, you can drive the truck to go out for that day and have a picnic lunch and talk and sing and pray and talk about all the people that you've known that make pottery. Or you drive to Santa Fe to the store, you drive up to the front, you park, and you throw the clay in the back and come home. Those are very different uses for a truck. That's first. Get your own materials. Second, you hand built it. All of this pottery that both Susan and Jody make is hand built. There's no wheel here. These are made like with ropes of clay that are stacked on top of one another. They're rolled out or they're hand formed. And if there's one little spot of air between those coils, the pot will explode in the firing. Now, when people build the pot like that, they build it, they smooth it, they sand it out, and then they put this watery clay mixture on it called the slip, and then you can paint on top of that. You can paint on top of the slip like that. And then following that, you take the pot outside. That's the second thing, that you're hand building the pot. The third thing is you fire outdoors. There's a lot of ways to fire outdoors, and people have innovated again and again in so many ways. And Jody is one of the great innovators, and this is a pot that shows a little bit of that innovation that maybe she'll tell us about in a moment. But that innovation, but those innovations do not change the fact that you're firing outside in an open fire, subject to wind, the moisture in the soil, whatever other conditions there are that particular day. Very complicated to fire outside, and something that makes these pots come out. You can see on this pot made by her mother, Rose Naranjo, that there's little fire marks on it. That's the fire just sort of licking at the pot just a little bit. So those are the three things. Get your own materials, hand build the pot, fire outdoors. And what you do in between those things, that's important, but you've got to maintain those three prayerful activities for it to be considered traditional. I just wanted to say one word about the word O Powa O Meng. So when we began to talk about a title for the exhibition, we came up with Jody's Pots, Jody the Great Potter. Wow, Jody's got kids that can make pots. We just tossed around, and it was, I just remember it being in the evening, we were sitting at her table, and she told me this story about herself, and she said, O Powa O Meng, which means, I really thought I didn't have to live here to be happy. I thought when I got old enough, I could go off and get a degree and teach and counsel in Santa Fe and other places. I really thought I could be happy do that. So O Powa. But O Meng, I found out I needed to come home. I needed to come home because my children were now here, and I could be whole coming home. And I didn't really know what I was going to do. I never wanted to be a potter. I was really not interested in that, but I came home and I started potting. So O Powa O Meng, we translated as I went, I came back. Wow, is that too simple? It's a whole concept of Jody's life that makes sense. So I thought, Jody, you could first correct me on anything I've said that you want to make clearer. Please.
You said it very well.
Oh, okay, thank you. That's so nice. So again, it's my pleasure to sit up here. I'm going to ask Jody to just talk a little bit about this particular pot to start.
This particular piece, I had originally made it for a particular design, there was an artist that had put together a pot that was similar shape to this, and the cats came along and broke it. So I thought, okay, if I made the pot, then he can come in and paint the pot, and we can have the original pot sitting there in front of me again. Then I thought that wasn't such a good idea. I remembered my father, who would go fishing and take us all fishing, and he would get us up maybe about 6 o'clock in the morning. He put us in the back of the Model T truck, and we would all go cruising down or cruising up to the canyon or to the river below our house. And we would fish. There were 10 kids, but there were 7 of us that were old enough to go fishing. So we would all go fishing, and we would catch enough fish and be back home by the time he was ready to go back to work. He was a plumber, and he worked up in Los Alamos, and he was a welder also. But with that, we had fish for breakfast for several days. There was fish to eat for other people in the neighborhood. There were mothers who had children but no fathers. So those children also had fish to eat. So this was something that I felt I needed to do to be able to show myself and give respect to my father and let the world know that this is what he did for a whole community that was around him. My father was an orphan, and he always had this sense of being able to give to others, but he used us to be able to do that. We also went rabbit hunting, we went turkey hunting, we went deer hunting, but most of the time he didn't take us deer hunting because we were a nuisance. But when we went rabbit hunting, we had sticks. He gave us sticks so we could push the sticks around the bushes and the holes and get the rabbits and the pheasants and the quails out, and he would be standing in front, but he never let us up in front. But this is basically a fish pot that was from my father, and being able to give that respect to him. So it's called Tavipa. And it's an important, there's so many stories about my father that it's so incredible. I'll give you one quick story. He was going through heart surgery, and during surgery, he had a stroke. So throughout that probably 4 years, we were able to get him to get up to walk. And eventually he ended up in a wheelchair, but he still wanted to go fishing. So my mother and I took him fishing and to one of the lakes in Santa Clara Pueblo, or Santa Clara Canyon. And the hatchery truck came along and was dumping all of this fish into the lake. And the guy looked at us, looked at my mother and I, and said, "Do you have a blanket?" And we said, "Yes." My father was so disgusted with my mother and I. He was so angry. But we were out there catching the fish that was coming out of the hatchery truck. So that is just one small story, but there's so many that I could tell you about our fishing trips.
So all those fish are from Santa Clara then, I guess?
All of those trout, yes. And the salmon, I go salmon fishing during the spring in Alaska and Canada. So one day I found out through PBS, one of the stations I was watching, that the trout was originally the main fish that evolved into salmon, into other forms of fish. So that I have the salmon at the bottom, but the trout at the top, the rainbow trout and the brown trout. So that's what we went fishing for.
So Susan, do you have any fish stories you want to share first? or other stories. It doesn't have to be about fish.
Sure. I was just thinking, the first thing that came to mind was a pot that Mom and I actually did together. And it's not in this exhibit, but a collaboration between she and I, because I was telling her about a dream I had about my grandfather, and that he had been passed away for a few years. But I had a dream that it was a whole family gathering, all the Naranjos together. But there was a priest there and had the collar on, right, the whole thing. And he came up to me and he told me, don't worry about your grandfather, he's happy. He's out fishing at the lake. And it's the lake behind Cochiti, Pueblo, which is, I don't know, as a crow flies, I don't know how far that is. But, you know, with a vehicle, it's 70 miles. But when I was telling Mom this story, she just looked at me and she said, you know, the old people talk about a sacred lake that's behind Cochiti that has since dried up. So that was a really powerful experience for the two of us. So we did a pot together with a fish spirit, holding fish like feathers, right? There's no face, it's a long robe, holding fish like feathers. And it was on a square pot. I mean, it just ended up, and then Mom had designed the fish at the bottom of the piece. So really striking, and Mom kept it in the family. I mean, that was something that...
One thing that is really a great reminder for all of us Pueblo Indians is that when you die, you go to your lake. So that that is part of that whole process of the lakes and the water and the fish. So it was real interesting when she told me about her dream and the fact that she had met my father at a particular place that we consider very sacred. And that was just really interesting. And I said to her, why don't we do a pot? So I built a rectangular pot and cut the bottom. And I had about 4 inches at the bottom that I kept. And the top I sent to her. I had no idea what she was going to do or what I was going to do. But when she brought back her top piece, the whole thing worked so incredibly. So that we had put the pot together. And what do we use to put the pot together with?
Glue.
Some kind of glue. So we have a glue pot someplace out
Wood
there.
filler. Yeah. Yeah.
She wanted to know what type of glue. Come on.
Right. Liquid nails.
All right. I lost my place with that. I'm sorry. Talk a little bit, if you would talk just a little bit about this particular pot, this half step. A lot of the pots never had names. Let me just say that, you know, that a lot of the pots don't have names. You see galleries make all sorts of names, like she stands with the wind in her hair, or he stands on a mountain and prays, and things like that. They're very romantic, but they're meaningless. And a lot of potters, though, have thoughts, or they think when they're making a pot, obviously they're thinking about what they're making. And what we drew out of Jody for the show was the meaning of the pot in making the pot, therefore the half step. But I've done not a good job in describing what a half step is. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that half step, and don't leave out Boleyn and Nestor, okay?
Okay. This is a real interesting piece because when I first started making pottery, and you have to understand that when you grow up in a pottery world, and Santa Clara is a pottery world, so that every family's making pottery, which is to be used for storage, was used for cooking, and used every day for whatever means that they needed to use it for. And when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, my great-grandmother, who was raising maybe about 12 of us kids, because the parents were off in the fields or working somewhere, and we would all go to my great-grandmother's house, And she had us get in the wagon. We went out to collect the wood. We went out to collect the clay. We went out to collect, and we were 4 or 5 years old, and that's what she made us do. But we always thought it was fun, but work all at the same time. But we never said no to her, because you'd never say no to your great-grandmother, right? And we had large storage jars that she was making, and water storage jars that she had made. And at one point, we had broken one of them, and she forced us to go down to the river to collect the water so that she could mix her clay, and that was our punishment for that day. And I always thought, no, I don't think I want to do that, because that is so much work. We went off to college. There were 10 of us, and my father and my mother said to us, you either go away to school or you stay home and work. There was no anything in between. So we all went off and received some kind of degree. My brothers and sisters have several degrees in different areas. And with me, I could not bring myself to teaching any longer. I originally received a degree in history and political science, and where are you going to get a job with history and political science during that period of time? That was 50 years ago. And then I decided I was going to start making pottery. But the whole process was difficult. But I already knew the process, so I thought it was going to be easy. I saw all of the Pueblos around me and different families who were making pottery, and I thought to myself, they all make the same piece. So I started doing the same thing, very traditional. I went out to sell my pots. I couldn't sell anything. Nobody wanted my pottery. I had to think about it, and I thought, okay, I need to take that half a step away from tradition. So this is part of the half a step that I took to be able to go beyond. And as Bruce said, no one would have bought this piece because it was too different. Now it's become traditional. So that has really changed, this particular piece has really changed the level of work that most Pueblos do now. Pueblo potters do. With this particular piece, I had wanted to do something that was certainly different, but it was still highly polished red, and the red slip that we use to polish the piece with, which is matted in the back of the buffaloes. And now you look at it and you say, okay, that's not that's not a very innovative thing. It's just there. But during that period of time, it was.
I think it's classical and beautiful. It's just amazing. I remember when she was building it when I was 5 years old. And when you see it in the gallery, it's about this big. And as a kid, it was the most amazing thing I ever saw. It's like my fish is this big, right? And she, just watching her apply the clay to make the buffaloes, right? Just with it was a popsicle stick. So she's like, well, I just started making pottery. This is what I can do when I just started making pottery. So that's always amazing to me.
Side of it? No, okay. On the reverse side of this pot, you have wolves running, chasing the buffaloes. Okay. Do you want to go to the next one?
So what else about in the house with your mom while she's making pottery? What did you learn from that? You also kind of stepped away. You thought you were going to be a firefighter in Alaska, different things, yeah. But you kind of stepped away too. But what do you remember about growing up in this household with Jody making pottery like that?
You know, that's a really interesting thought. I'd come home from school, there'd be clay on the kitchen table, there's, you know, several pots built. There would be a pot of rice and chicken or beef on the stove, you know, and then as a kid, you walk straight to the food, right? And she's like, don't touch that, that's for the dogs. So, while she's coiling her pots. So, you know, it was really interesting, and with my dad being a fine art painter, it was just so natural. I mean, every day at some point, coming home from school, and mom's working with clay, doing chores, and collaborating ideas with my father. So, you know, it's really, in that regard, it was just so normal for us. One of the things I really enjoyed, though, as a kid, when you'd have Native art fairs going on, and with my mom's 10 brothers and sisters, there were 40 of us cousins, so that's a lot of potters. But what was really nice, and it depended on whose house you were going to, but when at least half of them would come to the house, and everybody's got a pot in a different stage. Right, one's just built, one's built but dry, one needs to be polished, someone's sitting there carving their designs on their pot. And so everyone would just kind of sit there and commiserate and gossip, and once you're done with your own work, you pick up someone else's to help them. You know, that's such a normal communal thing to do, and nobody thinks twice about that, right? You make sure everybody's work gets done.
Why don't we just keep moving along, I guess. Why don't we talk about this pot a little bit? This is the pot, this pot, which, again, using Jody's words from earlier, this doesn't look very extraordinary to us now, but when that was brought into the judging room at the 1984 Indian Market, there was a debate that started in 1975 with the buffalo pot of whether it was traditional pottery, whether it belonged in Indian Market. This is the pot that set the Indian Market world on fire. Finally, somebody did something about all the same pottery being made again and again for the marketplace. And so Jody brought this in. There are several things that are not Pueblo pottery-like. The first is green, which is a natural mineral paint. There's no doubt about that. And then it had the red zigzags through it. And then she had her friend Bob Houses carved the figures on it. Bob is a Chiricahua Apache guy. And so he carved the figure. So you're going to say that somebody else worked on the pot? You didn't just work on it yourself? So now we've got all these errors in the ideas of what traditional pottery is supposed to be. And in the judging room, I happened to have been in the judging room that year. I had a full head of hair, and I was just 22, I think. But in that judging room that year, literally the room split into two groups. And there was one group that stood on one side of the pot, and there was a lovely pot that was also up for best pottery in Indian Market that year. It was a lovely, wonderfully made pot, and there was this green thing on the other side. And the people, mostly people with galleries and collectors, they said, we can't have green pots. They're not Pueblo, we don't need them. I'll never be able to sell it in my gallery. And the other side of the table said, finally, something different. Well, Jody went out and she sold the pot. Actually, the Wilsham family bought it directly from her. And you know, the next year in 1985, there were green pots every place. And you know what? We're all better for it.
Amen.
No. This is such an exceptional piece. It's absolutely beautiful. Bob and I designed the concept together, and he went ahead and carved the piece. But I like the whole idea of the green piece because it was totally different than what you were seeing among the traditional potters in Santa Clara or any of the other pueblos. So this was such an exciting piece to do. I wanted to do an Indian design on top of the green polish area, and also didn't have the very circular top. What I did was I cut a little bit at the top so that it became asymmetrical. So that was another big problem that most of the people had. So you have quite a few different issues there. The green, the asymmetrical piece, and the design itself. So that there weren't very many people that were very happy with that. And they weren't very happy with me.
Well, the other thing to just look at quickly before we change to another pot is, first of all, the pot is symmetrical in the sense, not the top, but the body of the pot itself is, right? That it's totally even. If you put a line down the middle, right down, Custard standing there, right, to put it right down between his legs and down, it would just be same on both sides, same measurement, everything. This is a hand-built pot. This is not a wheel. There's no ruler that she's using. This is totally by eye. That's one of the first things, and one of the things that you see about great potters is their ability to do that. It's hand-built. Look at the evenness of the walls. That's quite extraordinary. So you put those 5, 6, 7 layers of slip-on, each layer added after another, just before they dry, and then you take a stone, literally like a river around, smooth polishing stone, and you polish this with a stone. Keeping all those things alive, and now she's going to tell you more about that process. Thank you.
The pot is dry. It takes about 2 to 3 months to dry the pot. You sand the piece down, and after it's sanded down, you apply your slip, which was the green, and I go into the shower or to the bathroom and sit in the shower when I had already turned the shower on hot so that there's steam in there. And the older people didn't do that, but I learned how to do that because I didn't know how to polish that well. And I figured out that I can go into my bathroom and learn how to polish in there. So I would sit in there for maybe 3-4 hours polishing my pot. And that's about how long it takes to polish a piece that is about 10 inches high. And I would guess that this is about 10 inches high. And with a green slip, it's a little bit harder because it dries faster than the red slip. And when the slip starts drying, it looks really streaky and you don't have that high sheen. So then you have to sand the whole piece down and start all over again, maybe 2-3 days later, and you sit back in the bathroom and you start all over again. And this one probably took about 2 tries before I got this high sheen on the green slip. It's in the bathroom for about 3 hours. But this particular piece is also going up and down instead of in a circle. Most of the potters will polish their pieces in a circle, but mine on this particular piece is going up and down, which I felt was important for the green slip because it really brought it out. And it was growing. And then after I polished the piece, what I did was I applied the red slip to have the lightning stripes running all the way around. And it's not even, and I didn't want an even design on there as a background. Then after that, I fired the piece outside with white cedar wood and also applied a little bit of cow manure inside of the pot. I am going to tell you a quick story about why I needed to buy cattle and land. Most of the people in the Pueblo would go out and collect their horse manure, cow manure, and everybody's running around trying to collect before somebody else picks it up when it's dry. And I thought there has to be a solution to this. So I found some people in Kansas who were willing to trade me pottery for cattle. So I ended up with some registered Black Angus, but also in the meantime, I needed to buy some land to put those cattle on. So I bought 84 acres on the reservation and had my own cow manure. Then I didn't have to fight to find somebody to maybe buy it from or for me to go out and pick it up. One wonderful story, which you're going to really be amused by, is the fact that one time we went out. Susan was maybe 3 years old. My son was maybe 10, and my daughter was 12. So my daughter and I went out with our bags to collect the cow manure, and I said to my son, drive the bug out and find out where there's more and then come back again. So he's turned around and he was coming towards us and he was driving at us. And I was saying, stop, stop, stop. And then he turned the car around again and I could just see Susan standing in the back with her head bobbing up and down. And so I was screaming and running after my son, telling him, stop the car. And he couldn't stop the car. He was 10 years old, and that was the first time he was driving a car. So he finally ended up, the car stopped by itself because it ran out of gas, I think. So we were out of nowhere. And we had our bags of manure. We had my son sitting there saying, oh, God. So this is one of the little stories that went on. And with the children helping me pick the manure, and this was before I bought the land and before I had cattle. And that was when I decided I needed to do something to be able to have my own means of being able to get the manure. And later on, I purchased a ranch from my parents so that I had all the wood that I want to get also. And that's how I was able to be independently move around in terms of how I was going to do things and how I was able to acquire what I needed to fire my pots with.
Thank you. Yes. There's more to that story.
Yeah.
She's the largest landowner at Santa Clara Pueblo in a patriarchal society. Let's just leave it like that.
Exactly.
So, give us a little background on this pot. Sue, please.
Okay, so when my stepfather passed away, he was Maori from New Zealand, and I had just met my husband Davison, who's in the front row here. Well, not just. We were together about a year before we went back. It's traditional for Maori people to have a 1-year get together, the anniversary of the death. So my mom, Davison, myself, her older sister, and her husband from Taos Pueblo, we all flew to New Zealand, did that in memory of Lucky, and only if it felt right, we asked my mother, is it okay while we're here, once we're here, if we elope? Does that feel appropriate? And it's certainly in honoring Lucky's memory. So when we got back, I built this piece, and we were living in Tucson at the time, which is why it kind of looks like Tucson Studios, a spaghetti western. And I wanted to do something romantic and lovely, and you can see the 3 amigos back there, the villains, and that's Davison as Davy Crockett. That's me. And just around her, right, she has a traditional Maori sash on her belt. So what's really lovely, speaking of the green slip, this is the green slip applied in a different way. And the pink is a natural slip as well. The design work is acrylic and wood stain. But what's kind of, and that shows you how good of a potter I am. I never could replicate it again because I don't have the skill. But if you actually look at the piece in the exhibit and you look in the interior, and you'll see what Bruce was talking about, and you'll just see the pinch coils all in the interior. I mean, I can do it, I'm a potter, but just something that's that visually clean, and especially with a piece that's this large, it was a real accomplishment for me.
How about that?
That's a good one. So I started working on this. I've done things before, like when Harry Potter came out, I cruised through all the books. I have a number of Harry Potter pieces out in the world. And it was when did Star Wars come out? Like 1970? Yeah.
79, 76, 79.
We've got the expert. Okay, we'll take 77. But so there was a remake where George Lucas worked with the Navajo Nation about dubbing it in Navajo so that the original Star Wars, and dubbing it and showing it to the Navajo people. Part of it was for the kids to learn their language or keep them up with their language and keep their culture alive. And I just thought that was the most amazing thing. So I called Manny Wheeler, who worked on the Navajo Res at some point, and asked him how to translate "May the Force be with you" in Navajo. So that just sits right under the rim. So it's a blue slip. The tan, the background is the natural color of the clay. And there's, I can't even see. There's Yoda and Boba Fett, and they're just sort of the silhouette in the background of Arizona country, Pueblo country. And you turn it over, and sometimes what happens to me on occasion is I make these really bizarre shapes that I'm not really sure what to do with. So once I turned the pot over, and if you think about it, so I did the whole Death Star on the bottom of the pot, so that's what's there. But it looks like when it's turned over upside down, it looks like a nuclear explosion. It looks like, yeah, it's kind of amazing. So
Yeah.
Not sure what to do with it. Yes, another piece I'm proud of. It just kind of, and on the inside, so you'll have to look in this one as well. So I made sure to fire it with the manure at the bottom of the interior. So that just kind of looks like deep space. But on the inside of this rim it's a takeoff from Edward Curtis's photograph of Hopi maidens sitting on top of the rooftop in Hopi, watching a dance, waiting for someone to come. So
Explain where Hopi is and who they are.
Hopi people, how do you explain them, Bruce?
Hopi,
That's also a little complicated.
Hopi is 12 different distinct villages in the north east corner of the state of Arizona.
Yes, thank you. So in the interior are the Hopi maidens, and you'll recognize the image, the way the women are sitting, and you're looking at their backs, but they're watching and waiting for the Pueblo Braves in their Land Cruisers as they're land cruising around the top of the inside of the pot. So it's pretty fun.
One of the things that the pot brings up that it's still, people ask if this is native subject matter. People still ask that. I'm going to skip to this pot for a moment for the same reason. Sorry, Jody, I'm going right by everything. There it is. I'm going to skip to this pot. So people still think that pottery, because it's something out of the Pueblo world, in terms of calling it traditional, however we want to phrase that it has to stay in a certain subject matter. And I think what Susan, and there are others doing the same work out of comic books and film and so forth, are helping us understand that all of these things are shared inside the Pueblo world as well. And this is one of the pieces that you might wonder what a landlocked village like Santa Clara, which is about 30, 45 minutes north of Santa Fe in New Mexico. It's a dry place along the Rio Grande. But what does it have to do with a big conch shell like this? But this is another example of the worldliness of Jody and her family.
I was looking at the piece here while I was sitting, but this is such an incredible piece because I was sitting there at home, kids were at school, and all of a sudden I heard someone knocking at the door. But interestingly enough, I was already working on this particular piece, this shell piece. And why I was making a shell piece, I have no idea. But I heard someone knocking at the door, and I thought, no, I don't want to answer that. I'm too busy. Then they continued knocking. I opened the door. There were two Maoris from New Zealand standing there. And so they came in, and I thought, that's interesting. They wanted to have me go to New Zealand to be a part of a group show, group discussion. And that is where I met my husband, and I always thought that this particular piece was calling my husband to me. And I always felt that the spiritual part of pottery making is where the spirits really actually come in to help you develop what isn't inside of you, but what is outside of you, and eventually becomes a part of you, if you can understand that. Pueblo pottery has to do with a great deal of the spiritual energy that exists outside of us. That's what we believe. And I firmly believe that there is that part of you that still connects to something that is greater than yourself. And this is a very clear understanding for me to know that that is what is a reality for me.
What did we miss? Anything?
I don't know, but do the
Which one?
the cave piece. This one, okay, this one I did for my father because he was very ill, and I called this the Sacred Lake or Dagia Vip o Quinge. This is where we go to when we die, and this was their urn. And I was finishing the piece when this woman from one of the museums in New Jersey came in and said, I want that piece. And I said, I can't, because this is an urn for my mother and father. And she said, no, we'll take it. So I decided to go ahead and sell it. And when it was time to make an urn for my mother and father, it wasn't the piece that I wanted for them. It was a very simple, very quiet, micaceous piece that we buried my parents in. So that was real interesting because there was all of these things that went on in terms of elegance, in terms of what I thought should have been them. But in the end, it was a very simple, very quiet piece with a simple lid that they were buried in. Okay.
One particular, or should I just go through it?
Just anything. Yeah. This is part of the political pieces that I wanted to do in terms of when all of the issues were arising in Iraq. And we have Reagan riding through the desert on his horse, and at the bottom there's Saddam Hussein lying in the reeds and just very quietly praying. And And originally, this piece was a dog pot. There was a show, a women's show going on in DC. So they asked me to do a piece for the show. And I thought, okay, what shall I do? I did a very large micaceous piece. This is a micaceous piece with a dog sitting at the top because I was collecting and picking up dogs that were strays. I had 50 dogs at one time that I had in my yard, in my backyard, because people were just throwing dogs away in the spring when they had puppies. So at one point, I had 50 dogs. I found homes for them. They were all spayed, they were neutered, they were taken care of, and found homes for all of them within a period of 2 years. So I thought, okay, this is going to be a dog pot as a reminder as to what I was doing right at the moment. But instead, eventually, it turned into a political piece.
Well, the dog pots were political too, because you were not allowed to have more than 2 dogs
Right.
at Santa Clara, right?
So, so instead, there were 50 dogs when I was running down the road, down into the fields, because I walked and ran every single day, and I took my dogs running with me. So I had all of those dogs running with me.
And very recently, and unfortunately he's passed away, but Mom named one of her dogs Arf. So when Arf would break out, there's Mom running around the Pueblo screaming, Arf, Arf, Arf. Yeah, people just thought she was insane.
Yeah, I don't think they thought, they still think that I'm not very well. Yeah.
Yeah, not thought, think.
Through the life of the project, Jody cared for between 3 and 5 older dogs. And then there were old dogs, and then there were really old dogs. But these 5 dogs had the best life, their last years of their life, in her kitchen floor. They smelled terrible. They snored.
They get sick.
She literally had to carry a 100-pound dog outside. It was just an amazing thing to watch her care for these dogs. She, throughout her career of potting, when she needed money to care for the dogs, to spay and neuter them, food and so forth, she'd make a dog pot. And that's something that we were unable to find for the show, but that dog pot always sticks in my mind as something you did. I'm hurrying here towards an end so we can have a little bit of time for questions. Susan, do you want to say anything in closing about your mom? We can that you've never told her before?
Yeah, I think Arf was enough.
It must have been amazing growing up in the house with Jody. You know, I'm a longtime friend, and I just admire her so much. I just can't imagine there wasn't a dull moment, right?
Never a dull moment, and she's such a wonderful human being. Eccentric, lovely, very supportive of my own artwork and others. And it's always touching to me when my peers will come up to me and tell me how grateful they are for my mother's influence from what she did, then they can go on to do their own thing. Feel confident enough about that. So, thank you.
Jody has broad shoulders, and one of the values of being a curator and doing an exhibition like this is to show people whose shoulders they've climbed on to do the things that they're doing today. That they're innovative, they're wonderful, they're beautiful, but there had to be somebody who took that first half step, and that's been Jody throughout her career. Really fearless in so many different ways. A real strong individual, as Susan said. And eloquent in everything she does. One of 10 brilliant siblings, an unbelievable force in itself, and 40 cousins that are scary to stand in and hear the strength in the cousins as well. It's really quite an amazing family. So we're gonna have a couple of minutes for questions, and then I guess we're gonna sign some books, but also can we go up in the gallery so people can visit with Jody in the gallery? Okay. That would be great. Anyone dare have a question? All right.
All right. What you your Star exhibit? It was rock and roll awesome.
Hey!
So, little guys?
That's interesting because one of the curators from the Heard Museum in Phoenix had written to me and asked me, what would you say to yourself as a young person? And I thought about it for 5 months, and I thought, what would I say? All of a sudden it occurred to me that my great-grandmother, Jia Hung, her name means Mother Corn, who had raised us, would always say to us, you have to listen, listen. And I always found that interesting because whether we wanted to or not, we had to listen. And we had to look and see. And then you act. But you have to focus, she said. Because if you don't focus, then you are not there. That's what I would say to you. What my Jiahun would say to me. Okay, with the Obama piece. Yeah, right there. A lot of the older Indian people and the black people could not write their names. The slaves could not write their names. So that's the reason for the black, because of the fact that when they wrote their names, it was in an X, okay? So that was part of the Obama. Do you want me to tell you about when I first saw Obama? He came to Espanola, which is a town about 2 miles away from the Pueblo. And there were so many people that came to see him. There were lines of people. He came on stage, he had this smile on his face. And on top of that, there were a group of people behind us that were young people that were from Germany, that were from France, and they were all females. And so they followed us, and we went up to the front, and we were standing there, and all of a sudden, the young ladies behind me that were traveling to California decided to turn around in Phoenix to come back to Espanola because they heard Obama was coming in. And so they were saying and screaming, "Marry me, marry me." And so we all looked at him, and me, when would I say, "Marry me"? And I was standing there with them, jumping up and down, saying, "Marry me!" He looked down at us, and he had this biggest smile on his face when we were standing there screaming, "Marry me." All of this female screaming at him. So that's one of the stories that I have to tell you about the Obama piece. But I thought about, what would I do? I wanted to do something with him. And so I decided to do the Buffalo Soldier pieces because of the mere fact that the Buffalo Soldiers came out west to settle the country for the U.S. government. So I decided to make him a part of the Buffalo Soldiers that's marching into the White House. The large piece is the White House. So as you turn one of the tiles over, you'll see all of the names of the black slaves that were responsible for building the White House and most of the government houses in the Capitol. And if you see a number behind it, there's 7 people or 8 people with that name of Abel or Joseph or whatever the names were behind that tile. But mainly, I wanted to give some acknowledgement to all of those black slaves that were there, that were loaned out. They didn't receive the money, but they were loaned out to be able to build those huge buildings that we see now. And all of the black and red pieces represent the senators and the congressmen that are Republicans and Democrats. So that's what that piece is about.
I'll answer that one. You know, it becomes so ingrained, you can't, I mean, it's a lot of hard work. It's backbreaking work. But you also do enlist pottery slaves. My husband is one. But, you know, just like it's a communal thing, you know, when you get it, you're never alone. And like Bruce said, you know, you're going out, you're taking lunch. My grandmother would go, my mother would go, my brother would go, smaller cousins would go. I mean, whoever just had the time to help. And then you just divide the clay. So yes, it was a punishment. You're sitting out in the heat, running around, your parents, your grandmother screaming at you to stop it and pick up a pickaxe, right? And you're dragging the pickaxe around. And so, but it just becomes so instinctual, and you miss it when it doesn't happen. I mean, you honestly miss it. It's interesting.
I'll tell you just a quick story about another potter, Russell Sanchez. So I asked Russell, did taking his truck to the place where he gets the clay change things? And what Russell said is that, well, I used to walk there with one of his aunts, Rose Gonzalez. I used to walk there with Rose. And all the way there we walked. All the time we were there, we talked. And all the way back home, we talked. So I think that the idea of this time in another place, like Jody was talking about, ideas coming from other places to make pottery and so forth, and feeling that what many people, life force, whatever you want to call that, the presence of others, it doesn't matter how you phrase that. But Russell was really referring to that and getting into a place, a space where he could make pottery. The house goes quiet. Maybe there's some potters like music, some potters turn the TV on, other potters want total silence. Some potters send everybody out of the house for that first part. But that silence, either created through noise or through the absence of noise, is a place where all those generations come together in the house. And I really think Russell expressed that to me that day when I was asking about that in a way that made just a perfect sense to me. And he misses Rose. But when he goes to get clay, Rose is always with him.
Every summer, at the end of the summer, before winter sets in, we go out and in our truck and go into the hills with our shovels, our pickaxes, and and our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and we go out to go pick clay. And it'll take probably about a day, 2 days to pick maybe a quart of a truckload of clay. We take it home, we put it on large tables to dry, and when you see the clay and when you take it out of the ground, it's like a hard piece of marble, but it's soft enough where you can dig into it. And as it dries on the table, and throughout a period of maybe 6 months throughout the winter, you sprinkle water on it so that it starts falling apart and it starts slitting, starts cracking. And so when it all falls apart, then it's ready to be put into containers. And that would maybe be about a year or so before all of this process ends. And after it's put into large containers, you pour hot water into it. And the clay just melts down and it becomes like lotion. So then you pick up your clay and put it into another container so that you can start sifting it. And it depends on the kind of sifter that you want. If you're going to do micaceous clay, then because it has little specks of mica in it, you use maybe, maybe 40-20 mash screen, which is fairly big. So with the Santa Clara clay, it needs to be much thinner. So if you're going to polish your piece, you need to make sure that your clay is sifted through probably a 60 mash screen or 80 mash screen. You don't want to have any of the little bits and pieces of wood that has embedded itself or the pebbles that are in the clay.
Or dog hair.
Because when you start making your piece and you polish it. You have this huge little piece of stone that's sitting there. And also, when you're firing your pot, if there is anything in there that shouldn't be in the clay, it'll start moving out, and the pot will break. And when it's firing and you're standing there and you're going, I just heard a noise, and it's bing, bing, and you know your pot's gone.
It's the worst sound in the world.
Yeah. So that's what we do. That's how we process our clay. And by the time your clay and your ash has been collected and mixed together, that's probably 2 years. And to age your clay, another year. So by the time you're ready to make your pots, 3 years have gone by. And for me to make one piece that is maybe 10 by 10, takes me half an hour to build. So that at one time it would have probably taken me half a day, and now it takes me maybe a few hours.
So thank you, everyone, for being here tonight.
Thank you for coming.